What's the dumbest thing you've ever done solely because you were too awkward to do the normal thing? One time I saw watermelons at the store in a big box labeled 19 cents. I, stupidly, thought this meant the watermelons were 19 cents each. I put 8 in my cart. Imagine my surprise, then, when the cashier rang up my watermelons for 30 some odd dollars. Baffled, I just stared at him and realized it was 19 cents per pound. I was too awkward and embarrassed to tell the cashier I misunderstood or changed my mind, so I just accepted my watermelon-y fate. I ate watermelon for breakfast and lunch and dinner. I made watermelon margaritas and watermelon sorbet. There isn't a watermelon recipe on Pinterest I didn't consider. It was halfway through the watermelon fiasco, after complaining about the stupid watermelon for days, that I realized that even if they had been only 19 cents, I still bought too many goddamn watermelons. I needed one sheet of blank printer paper from the computer lab at my college. There were maybe 5 other students in there when I walked in and I was afraid that pulling open the paper drawer on the printer would be super loud and disruptive, so I logged onto a computer and printed out 5 blank pieces of paper instead. That's the most commitment I've ever seen anyone make to not causing a disruption. One time in middle school I was standing in a line in this little building where the school sold concessions at lunch. There was another line right next to me, to my right, and in that line there were 2 girls talking with each other, just slightly ahead of me. One of the girls had some writing on her shirt on the chest and I was bored and trying to read it. I overhear the other girl tell her that little kid over there is staring at your boob. So instead of just being normal and saying oh no, I'm just trying to read your shirt, I instead start staring at the wall past her. Like staring into the distance is just a normal thing I do. I let people walk around me in the line because I'm so committed to my new staring gimmick. What an idiot I was. I did not think this thread would make me lose my crap as much as it has. Holy frick. Once I was in a taxi and I think the driver must have misheard my address. I noticed he was going the wrong way, but I didn't say anything because I was too awkward. Finally he drops me off about half an hour from my house, and I'm all like that's perfect, thanks mate. Paid with a tip, got out, walked around for a bit, waited for him to go, then called another taxi to get me home. When I was in middle school I went to a day camp in the summer and didn't know how to swim. Rather than admitting that and being taught, and embarrassed, I would go to the bathroom to change and just hide in the stall until swim time was over. The counselors called me a thug and bathroom boy, but I never had to go into that pool. I hugged a job interviewer when I was 16. The interview had concluded and she opened the door and stretched out her arm towards me to indicate I was free to go. For some reason I saw it as an invitation to hug and we had the most awkward one-armed hug back pat ever. I've been reading this thread for like an hour. This is the worst one, OMG. I had a sleepover at a friend's house when I was around 12. Both him and his parents fell asleep pretty early, without getting me a sleeping bag or blankets. So instead of waking them up and asking where I could get one, I curled up into a ball and slept in a pillowcase. When I was in high school, I had a huge crush on a girl who worked at the drive-thru of my bank. I would go to a different branch, withdraw some cash and then deposit it at her branch's drive-thru in hopes she was working. It wasn't until much later that I realized she could more than likely see I had made a withdrawal for the exact amount I was depositing just minutes before. Oh bro. I rode my bike to college one time and had no bike lock. So I tied it up with an extra shoestring I had, hoping any passerby would see it was locked without investigating too closely. As I'm leaving class I see a couple students standing by my bike taking pictures of my lock job and laughing. I sat like 50 yards away in shame waiting for them to leave before I retrieved my bike and left. I can't help but notice how they didn't steal it. Success was yours. I bought tweezers to groom my eyebrows. I'm a man. When my female friend saw them in the bag in my back seat, she asked whose they were and I was too embarrassed to say they were mine, so I said I don't know. Somebody must have left them, and she took them for herself and I had to buy new ones. Who just takes a random pair of tweezers? That's the awkward part. Nice username. Allowed my neighbor to call me the wrong name for 7 years because I never corrected him the first time he said it wrong. Conversely, I never used my neighbor's name because I forgot it the first time he told me and was too embarrassed to ask him. He always greeted me and my dog by name. We were neighbors for 3 years. I was so happy when he moved. I was really anxious for one of my first adult meetings that I was doing, so I looked up the person I was meeting with, and when they came in to shake my hand I introduced myself as them. They thankfully laughed it off and just said, "No, that's my name." I cringe every time I think about it. Oh god, I had almost repressed the memory, but I've done this. In a group, introductions going around. I was really nervous because my crush was there and I accidentally said his name instead of my own name. I shook someone's hand and introduced myself as Greg. I'm a chick. I ran into a past co-worker at a bus depot. Had nothing really to talk about and it got awkward fast. A bus came and the guy said, "This is me." It was the one I was waiting for too, but I didn't get on cause what the heck would happen if I did? Made it worse as he got on I said, "Drive safe." I took a huge bite of donut right before someone asked me a question during a work meeting. Instead of waiting or holding up a finger to say just a moment, I tried to swallow it and started choking to death. It's a good thing you didn't finish choking to death. My work friend and I were working on a sort of secret project in a big closet that's behind a conference room. We were almost finished when people started filing into the room, so we quietly closed the door and continued working, figuring it would be a quick meeting. 5 minutes pass, 10 minutes pass, and oops, now we're in too deep and can't leave without it being awkward. We were in there for nearly an hour before my friend finally gives up and opens the door to the room. We profusely apologized to our co-workers for interrupting as they sit there stunned. Of course, instead of just being people we knew who we could laugh it off with, there were a couple of people visiting from one of our international offices and some of our international vendors. They probably think it's standard for the US branch to stuff younger employees in a closet now. When I was around 5 or 6, I was playing at a friend's house outside and I was too nervous to ask to use the bathroom, plus I had never gone inside their house, so I peed my pants and left without saying anything, lol. One of my friends did this exact thing. She suddenly had to leave for some reason and later I found our couch soaked in urine. Felt bad for her. Back in primary school I had a crush on a girl. Her younger brother was kind of a friend, so I'd hang out at their place every once in a while. Thinking it would be weird to ask if I could hang out, I'd go for a run past their place and hope they'd notice me and invite me in. It worked, but most times I had to turn back and run past at least 4 times before they'd invite me in. Girl sent me obviously provocative picture of herself on Snapchat saying wide. I was eating dinner at the time, which was spaghetti, and so I sent a picture of it back saying spaghetti. She pretty much stopped taking to me after that. When I was younger I had a friend who lied a lot. I went to her house one day and she had those little colorful gobstoppers unwrapped all over the floor of her room. I asked her if I could have one and she kept insisting they were gobstoppers but wouldn't tell me what they were. I figured she was lying, and when she left the room momentarily I popped a few in my mouth. Turns out they weren't gobstoppers. They were plastic balls from a game. I kept them in my mouth for probably 45 minutes until she left the room again just so she wouldn't see. My friend's mom rolled my hand up in the window of the car while I was in the back seat. It hurt really bad, but I was too awkward to say anything, so I rode for about 10 minutes with half of my little hand squashed and hanging out the rolled up window. I think eventually I said ow or something to alert her to the situation. I would laugh so hard if I was passing your car and saw that. Half a hand squished in a window and a kid sitting there pretending like nothing happened. I was at a club once. The DJ was taking requests. To make a request you had to fill out a slip of paper and give it to him. Anyways, I do this, walk over and hand it to him, and he was like, "Alright man, nice," and held out his hand. For some reason he wants to hold hands, and held his hand for like 10 seconds. Fingers interlaced even, and just looked at each other the whole time. Then it hit me that he wanted a high five and I got super embarrassed. I broke my hand in the middle of my totally gorgeous TA's story and didn't say anything because I didn't want to interrupt him. Proceeded to walk with him to class and sit through his lecture, feeling awkward for not taking notes, while my hand swelled up like a balloon. He approached me the next day, confused, when someone else told him that I had broken my hand the previous afternoon on the bus. Wait, I was with her the whole time. Spent an entire Thanksgiving weekend pretending I understood Korean because I felt too awkward to correct my friend's Korean mom who assumed I was Korean too. Anyong. Off the top of my head, being at a crosswalk and pretending to walk down the road instead because I would rather let oncoming cars pass first rather than have one stop and wait for me to cross. The accuracy of this is not even funny. I do this every day when I walk to my job shadow, or co-op placement, as we call it here in Ontario. It's comforting to know I am not the only one who does this. On a lark, I decided to join the swim team in 9th grade. On the first day of practice we had to lift weights first thing. I was a scrawny kid who overdid it trying to look tough. By the end I couldn't lift my arms. Then, after changing and shuffling onto the poolside bleachers, I heard the coach say that we were going to do 25 laps as a warm-up. I knew I couldn't do that and would sink like a stone, but there was no way I could walk off in a Speedo and save my pride. So, instead, when he finished his pep talk by saying all you springboard divers just head on over and start stretching before doing dive warm-ups, I made the spontaneous decision to switch sports. I had never even been on a diving board before. I was so self-conscious that people would know that I switched because I was too weak to swim 25 laps that I stuck with it for 3 years and ended up earning a varsity letter as a diver. Now that's a good story. Accidentally locked myself on the roof of my office's parking garage. It was my first week there and I didn't know the doors closed behind you and locked. I'd left my access badge on my desk. Rather than call for help and be that guy, I climbed down the side of the parking garage. I once did the same thing at my high school, only there was nothing to climb down. It was on the 2nd floor. I thought it wasn't that high so I could jump and brace myself for the landing and not get hurt. I broke my leg and had to go to the hospital. I saw somebody open a roll of pennies before by smacking it on the drawer. I had never opened one before and I had 2 customers watching me as I smashed pennies all over the place. Now I just tear it open instead of trying to be cool. I was doing a job interview in high school. The interview was going well and the lady asked me how important is hygiene to you. During this moment I forgot what hygiene meant and should have asked. Instead I tried to act relaxed and said I'm cool, doesn't bother me. I didn't get the job. I was in the military and was at drill with a new unit. We had to stay overnight so one of the soldiers' families that owned the restaurant catered dinner. The meat was grey and looked absolutely disgusting, so I declined when it was offered to me. The person dishing it out joked around and asked why I didn't want any, so I said the first thing that came to mind. I'm vegetarian. That's not really common in the military, so the entire meal was spent with people poking fun at me and I went along with it all being the new one in the group. Besides, how do you tell people you lied about that? Shortly after, we deployed and I spent 10 months eating every meal with people who thought I was vegetarian, so I spent the entire deployment living off of grilled cheese, salad and rice when all I wanted was a big butt burger. 6 years later, I'm still vegetarian. If I could have seen that coming, I assure you my last meal with meat would definitely not have been McDonald's chicken nuggets. TLDR. Lied about being vegetarian instead of just politely declining nasty looking meat like a normal person. Ended up actually having to be vegetarian. I was crying laughing telling this to my IDK why I find this so hilarious. You just committed so hard, lol. I was shopping in Best Buy as a teenager and had on a nice leather jacket because I thought I was cool. Looking around one aisle I have the urge to sneeze, so I'll let it out. I ended up sneezing a rather large blob of snot onto the lapel of the leather jacket. I noticed this quickly as I made eye contact with a worker and a lady coming down the aisle. Without thinking, I almost instantly licked it off of my jacket and kept on walking. The worker and the woman just looked at me in shock and were pretty much petrified. I kept on walking. To this day I have no idea why I did that without hesitation. It still haunts me, and I never told a soul, except for you, Reddit, cause I appreciate ya. Freshman year in college, I had been to Michigan to visit family and bought some pepper jack cheese from a farmer's market. Back at school, I was sharing it with my roommate, having crackers, cheese and pepperoni while playing video games. We had our door open, and our 10/10 female RA came by and asked what we were up to. Rather than say playing video games or just chillin' or something normal, I'll look her dead in the eye and in an uncharacteristically peppy voice go eatin' cheese. She just goes oh, okay and walks away. My roommate was dying laughing. My friends still remind me of it to this day. The first time I took a bus in a new city, I pulled the stop request cord at the wrong stop. Instead of just being a normal person and telling the driver that I didn't mean to do that, I got off the bus and walked for an hour in the rain. This is the best one. I would probably do that. I got a random bout of social anxiety once while having to go into a Home Depot to pick up my dad's order of tile and was just so unwilling and afraid to actually talk to an associate that I called my dad and took the phone up to the employee at the counter while I just awkwardly stood away from them and looked at paint. Oh god no mayo. In 7th grade there was a girl who was super into gay people, to the point where she had gay dating apps on her phone. Of course I had a crush on her, so instead of talking to her and getting her to like me like a normal person, I told everyone I was gay. During college in the middle of the semester, I somehow walked into the wrong classroom. Even though I didn't recognize any of the students, I assumed some of the familiar faces that I'd normally see were running late. 5 minutes into the class I realized I wasn't in linear algebra but in some sort of Spanish for advanced kids class. I was too dumb to walk out and ended up even dumber as I remained seated until the class was out. Frick, I did this a few weeks ago. You're not alone. Walked into the room for my next class early and saw it was full, and for some reason I assumed that class had already started, so everyone stared at me as I grabbed a seat. After a few minutes the teacher stopped lecturing and everyone got up and left while I sat there in shame. I said bye to someone and we both walked toward the elevators in the hospital. It was just too awkward for me, so I proceeded to take the stairs down 12 flights instead. Sometimes when I'm alone in a strange place and don't know whether I should go sit somewhere by myself or join a group of strangers, I visit a bathroom, sit in the stall for a while, go outside, visit another bathroom and repeat until a friend shows up or class begins. Now that I think of it, it is hilariously awkward. As an undergrad, I was invited to a Halloween costume party. I only knew the person who invited me, and everyone there seemed to know each other, so I was like the odd man out. After about 30 minutes of pounding jungle juice and standing around awkwardly, I went outside, buzzed, to escape. I wanted to go home, but my friend had driven me, so, instead, I found a gap in the shrubbery around the house's foundation and hid there, watching other drunks come and go from my cloak of concealment. This was all fine and well until a girl noticed me and I guess startled because she screamed and made a scene. I booked it out of there and walked, in costume, a couple miles to a convenience store to call a relative to come pick me up. That was the last time that friend invited me to her party. Maybe your costume was so good that you spooked her and she was trying to tell everyone about how cool it was. In like 3rd grade, I was walking back to class from the bathroom. I saw this guy walking in the same direction next to me and I got nervous and sped up to walk into my class. I opened the door and realized that it wasn't even my class, it was his. So I basically just opened the door for him and he looked at me like WTF as he walked in. I closed the door behind him and walked into class. The manager of my local thinks my name is Jolath. My name is not Jolath. I don't know why he thinks my name is Jolath, but he does. I corrected him a few times, and he kept reverting back to Jolath, so I gave up. Like, he's introduced me to regulars in his pub as Jolath, and now I have to pretend to be Jolath if I bump into them around town. Even my wife gave up. In his pub, I'm Jolath. The last time I was there he set up a tab for my table. At the end of the night I went up to pay with my card, which is my actual name on it. He saw the name and kinda froze as it dawned on him that my name is not Jolath, and that he'd been giving the odd free pint to an imposter. And because I was very drunk and wanted to spare him from embarrassment, I told him that it was my friend's card, because obviously I'm Jolath. Time to move to a different city, I think. Once I was on my way to class when a girl I thought was incredibly annoying started trying to have a conversation with me. For some reason I decided to fake a cough and run into the bathroom to get some tissues and walked straight into the men's room where a guy was peeing at the urinal. I am not a man, so I slink out of the bathroom and walk to my classroom, sit down for class for a few minutes and realize I'm an hour early and walk out. She saw the entire thing, minus the peeing, I assume. Walking into an office, ahead of a girl, I stopped and held the door open for her, so she walked in ahead of me. There was a long line inside. I didn't know if I should be ahead of her in line or she should be ahead of me, so I turned around and left. Stupid awkward frick. In situations like that I always just wave the other person ahead of me. It's only one more person in front of you and it makes you look good no matter what. Was staying the night at a friend's house when I was around 10-11. Had to take a crap and when I was all done there was no toilet paper. An absolute nightmare. I checked under the sink, in the cabinet, everywhere. My friend was outside and the only people in the house with me were his mom and his older sister that I had a crush on. So I certainly couldn't shout out that I needed more toilet paper. So I weighed my options. Towels or cotton balls. So I wiped my butt with cotton balls. This happened yesterday. I'm in Germany and I can't speak very good German. I'm at a canteen restaurant in a Kaufhof for breakfast. I pick up a tray and get myself some bread and cheese etc and some blood orange juice. As I walk over to where to pay I spill loads of the juice all over my food. My tray is just soggy red bread and cheese. Instead of trying to ask if I can replace it or just doing it anyway I go over to the cashier and freaking pay for my soggy red sticky breakfast. The lady looks at it and back to me and back to it and says something in German probably along the lines of "Are you sure you want to pay for this?" I looked at her and shamefully said "Ja, bitte." And then she counts it all up and it was almost 10 freaking euros for just some bread, cheese, ham and juice. My anxiety combined with my Britishness and awkwardness is not a good combination at all. This is the most freaking Douglas Adams thing ever. When I was a freshman in college, I saw a production of some Shakespeare play and developed an instant crush on the lead actor. I saw him at lunch the day after the play, and my friends urged awkward, shy, 17-year-old me to approach him and say how much I enjoyed his performance in the show. I'm not sure if they really thought this very attractive senior was going to have any interest in me, but apparently I got talked into it, because I marched over to his table and he and all his friends fell silent as I approached. I stood there trying to think of what to say. Now that I was actually there, I opened my mouth and said, "Very nice." I was a teenage girl, but I said it like Borat. Unfortunately, he had no idea what I was talking about and didn't say anything, so I tried again. "You were great last night," I said. As soon as the words left my mouth, his friends lost their crap and started whistling and laughing. I was mortified and slunk back to my table awkwardly. I swear I still cringe about this, almost 30 years later. A friend gave me a slice of Velveeta cheese at her house. I tried it and thought it was gross, so I smashed it in between the couch cushions to get rid of it instead of telling her I didn't like it and throwing it away like a normal person. The garbage can is too good for Velveeta. You did the right thing. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.